You didn't wake up expecting today to require so much of you. You woke up thinking it would be manageable. You had a plan, a rhythm, an idea of how the day would unfold. But before you realized it, things began to demand more attention, more patience, more strength than you had calculated. Not because something dramatic happened, not because everything went wrong, but because life kept asking. Messages came in. Responsibilities stayed present. People needed answers. And slowly, quietly, the day asked more of you than you thought it would. Still, you showed up. You adjusted. You stayed engaged. You kept your composure. Even when you felt pressure building inside. That tells us something important about you. You were stronger than this day expected. Not loud strength. Not visible strength. But the kind that holds things together without drawing attention to itself. This devotional is for the people who keep functioning. Even when the internal cost is high. For those who don't collapse, but carry weight silently. For those whose strength is expressed through steadiness, not spectacle. God sees that kind of strength, and Scripture speaks directly to seasons like this. Consistency doesn't look impressive. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels repetitive, demanding, sometimes draining. You've been living in a season where nothing has fully fallen apart. But nothing has been easy either. The pressure hasn't been sharp. It's been steady. And steady pressure can be harder to carry than sudden crisis. Because crisis ends, consistency keeps asking. There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from doing too much at once. It comes from doing enough for a long time, without pause. You don't feel exhausted in one moment. You feel worn across many moments. Your body keeps moving. Your mind keeps processing. Your responsibilities keep showing up. And because you are still functioning, it's easy for others to assume that nothing is wrong. But internally, you feel how much effort it takes to stay regulated, to stay kind, to stay patient, to stay focused. This kind of fatigue doesn't announce itself. It doesn't force you to stop. It simply asks more from you than you expected to give. You've had to make decisions. When your emotional energy was limited, you've had to stay present. When rest felt overdue, that requires strength that most people never notice. Not dramatic strength. Sustainable strength. The kind that allows you to remain steady without burning everything you have at once. You didn't ignore your limits. You learned to work within them. You adjusted your expectations. You paced yourself. That adjustment is a sign of maturity, not weakness. Because real endurance is not about pushing endlessly. It's about learning how to last. You didn't quit because things mattered. You didn't disengage because people depended on you, and even when you felt tired. You chose responsibility over relief. That choice required strength. Psalms 73:26 says, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart, and my portion forever." This psalm wasn't written in the middle of collapse. It was written from endurance. The psalmist was still standing, still participating in life. But internally, he was aware of his limits. He didn't hide that awareness. He didn't pretend to be fine. He placed his weakness in the presence of God, and God did not shame him for it. God became strength where his own strength was thinning. That's what sustained you. Not extra energy, not sudden motivation. Provision. Enough strength for today. Enough clarity for the next step. That is real strength. Responsibility doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't check your emotional reserves. It doesn't slow down when you feel overwhelmed. It simply remains. You've been carrying responsibility that couldn't be postponed. Decisions that needed to be made. Tasks that depended on you. And because you didn't fall apart, people assumed you were fine. They didn't see the internal discipline, the restraint, the energy management. But God did. Psalm 55:22 says, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you." Notice the word sustain. It doesn't say remove. It doesn't say eliminate the burden. It says support. David wrote this: "While pressure remained, leadership didn't stop. Conflict didn't disappear. But the crushing sense that everything depended on him alone was lifted." You didn't stop being responsible. You stopped being isolated inside responsibility. That quiet shift is why you're still standing. One of the hardest parts of this season has been carrying weight that no one asks about. There is no obvious sign that you're holding more than usual. You still show up. You still respond. You still keep things moving. So the assumption is that everything is fine. But strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like absorbing pressure without passing it on. You didn't want to add weight to someone else's life, so you carried it quietly. That choice required self-awareness. It required discipline. And it required trust that you didn't have to explain yourself to be seen by God. Psalms 38:9 says, "Lord, all my desire is before you, and my sighing is not hidden from you." Even what you didn't say was known. Even what you chose to hold inside was seen. You were never invisible. In this season, You were simply quiet. And quiet endurance still counts. It still matters. It still shapes your character in ways that noise never could. One of the hardest parts of this season has been regulating yourself, choosing your responses carefully, pausing before reacting, not because you were afraid, but because you were wise. Self-control takes strength. It requires awareness. It requires restraint. And restraint costs energy. You didn't become colder. You became more measured. You learned when to speak. And when silence was safer, that wasn't weakness. That was maturity forming. Psalm 121:3 says, "He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber." This promise doesn't say the path will be smooth. It says you won't fall. And you haven't. Even when the ground felt uneven, you adjusted your pace. You learned how to last. Isaiah 40:31 says, "Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Waiting here does not mean inactivity. It means continuing. Without immediate reward, without visible confirmation, you waited while working. You waited while deciding. You waited while carrying responsibility, and strength was renewed. Not as excitement, but as stability. Enough to keep going. That matters. Jesus understands this kind of life. In Matthew 11:28, he says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Notice who he invites. Those who labor. Those already carrying weight. He doesn't shame effort. He doesn't minimize fatigue. He offers rest that exists inside real life, not escape. Restoration. Reassurance that you are not alone inside what you carry. This season strengthened you in ways you may not fully see yet. It sharpened your discernment. It clarified your priorities. It taught you what truly deserves your energy and what quietly drains it. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." You learned to guard your heart, not by withdrawing, but by becoming intentional. That is growth. You were stronger than this day expected, not because you felt powerful, but because you stayed faithful. Nothing you carried was invisible. Nothing you endured was wasted. God saw the discipline, the restraint, the quiet endurance, and he honors that kind of strength. If this devotional spoke to you, like the video, share it with someone who has been carrying more than they say. Subscribe for more devotionals rooted in real life and real faith. May his peace find you today.